Hey, Bob, guess what? No, hold on. I'm going to tell you. It's time for another episode of Let's Chat Sales.
Let's Chat Sales. Yes. So excited.
Are you? All right.
I am.
So
I live for this.
So today, this is a bête noire for me. This is a bit of a personal issue for me. In fact,
what was the word you used?
Bête noire, like a monster.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's a new one. I'm assuming that's French.
It is French. I want to talk for just a quick minute about slides, about presentations and slides.
I think it's going to be more than a minute, just so you know, folks.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
I am of the opinion that you don't need slides as often as you think you do. And
that's crazy. That's heresy. How dare you, Brandon?
Yeah.
PowerPoint's rule. They're the single greatest creation that we have in our modern civilization.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think...
Tell us why.
Well, because I think that in a lot of cases, and it's especially true early on in the sales cycle, in the early history or the early stages of a company, you're still trying to build product. You don't have a clearly defined product, or your product is evolving and so forth. And slides have a tendency to turn something that's still malleable into something that's very concrete.
And rigid.
And leaves you without the ability to kind of move and do discovery and have a kind of meaningful conversation with customers. So that's one thing that bothers me about slides is they kind of put you in a spot. And now you have to talk to that slide deck. The second thing is they draw attention away from you and the conversation and the customer and their conversation and towards some other medium. Now they have to read. Now they have to focus on something else instead of focusing on you or focusing on what their thoughts are. And the third thing is they have a tendency to just slow everything down. And that is you got to get them set up. You have to shift back and forth. These people that use builds, that drives me nuts because now you have to make sure you're clicking the keyboard all the time. I find slides to be really an ineffective tool. And so when I go and do a sales call, in most cases, I try to avoid a set of slides at all if I can. I may have them teed up, and I think it's useful to have them teed up in the background. But I find that one of the things you can do is you can often have them teed up, be on the cover slide or be on the agenda and never leave that slide. And so very quickly, you've kind of checked off this idea that, the guy's got slides, he's prepared. But the conversation just goes in whatever direction it should go based on the kinds of questions you ask, the statements they make, the kind of questions they might ask, and so forth.
So you're not a big fan. You're not a big fan of that idea that I'll get to that slide in 10 minutes, which is one of my favorite things to hear at a meeting. Nothing says you're helping me like I'll get to your question on slide 18.
I thought it makes me nuts. That sort of thing. And for a customer to hear that, it sort of telegraphs, all right, they're not really interested in what I have to say. They're interested in going through their routine. And
that you have to fit in the company's box. And I think that's the number one thing that customers these days really want. They want a customized solution. Even if it's the same solution you give everyone, they want to feel it's customized by the way you present it to them, the words you use, the way you integrate it. You could go back to the office and say, hey, we're doing the same 5-step process we've always done, but to company X, without the slides, without all the, the brochures that tell you the 5 steps, they're like, this is just the process for us.
Yeah, and it is customized in the sense that you're talking about it in terms that are specific to them. So even though your product may be a relatively generic product, this feature, you're talking about this specific feature, this functionality, and you're talking about it in terms that are specific to them. The slides are really secondary to the conversation and the description and your knowledge and expertise of the problem and the solution is much more important than that visual element, which I think can kind of lock you down.
Well, one thing I've really committed to doing is not using slides as much as possible. And I do a fair amount of speaking. Yeah. And organizers of the things I speak at, some of the workshops, some of the conferences are like, where are your slides? I'm like, I'm not going to use slides. And they're very put off by that. I have found in the sales process, one thing that can be so much more powerful is to use a whiteboard. And to put keywords on a whiteboard and to make it feel like it's organic to that moment. Yeah. Even though I've thought out what I might put on the whiteboard, the keywords, the things I'm going to put, they feel like it's unique to them because it's a blank page and suddenly there are words that go up on it. And I think that can be a really powerful tool in creating that sense of customization and also a sense that you're hearing what they're saying, because so many of the words I put up are their words so that it's highlighting it. And I find that can be a really good way to manage things. I think one of the other problems I've seen with PowerPoint slide presentations is that people really cling to them like, I want to make sure I get to everything. I don't want to forget one step in the process. And that creates the sense that, oh, geez, this is going to be boring. And I've been at meetings where someone pulls out the deck and you're like, oh, here we go. Really? Or worse than that, they pull out the deck the second time because there are two new people that weren't at the last meeting. And they're like, let me roll through the slide deck one more time for those of you who missed it 2 weeks ago. Which is, like the worst thing you could do in the room, probably.
So
what do you do, Brenda? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What do you do in the situation where someone says, so we'd like to see your slide deck in advance?
I think if you have to have a slide deck, sometimes it's helpful to have one that's got all the words on it, and then you've got another one that's just the images. And I like to not send them slides ahead of time, or I'll send them some very shortened version, some very summarized version of what it is.
Dummy slides?
Well, like a very short set of slides that maybe just touches on the key points of who the company is. The less I can provide in terms of information prior to the meeting, in some cases, the better. Because it depends on where we are in the process, in the sales process. But generally speaking, I want to try and have a discovery call with them. I want to learn from the customer. In fact, in any presentation, I'm hopeful that I'm speaking less than half the time. Now, if it's a very large group of people, that's probably not possible. Then it's much more of a true presentation. But one of the things I find about the presentation process is the sooner I can get a customer at some point to speak up and say something, the more comfortable I get in the meeting, because now it's no longer a presentation, it's much more of a dialogue. And so psychologically, for me, I find that to be really helpful. So if I can figure out a way to get them to provide some kind of feedback, can weigh in on something, ask a question, direct me in a certain direction, those things that kind of all help me feel much more like it's an interactive session, and then I'm much more I'm in a much more comfortable place.
Sure. I think part of that is also they feel like, wow, this guy's willing to stand up there without the PowerPoint. Because I think some people kind of think of it as a shield. It prevents me from I can't make any mistakes if I'm sticking to the PowerPoint slides and I'm reading what I've said 88 other times.
I think, though, it is helpful if there's a projector up there and they're expecting PowerPoints, it's not a bad thing to have them. I just think you ought to make them very generic so that you're constantly focusing back to your talk, to what you're going to talk about. And, building rapport, right? Isn't that really rapport? Building rapport. It depends on how large the group is. If you're doing a formal presentation, then you probably need to have slides up there. If it's a group of if it's a demo or a Zoom call or it's just a few people, then you may not need to have any slides at all. Or you may want to, again, like I said, tee one up and then just talk and say, hey, here's what I had in the agenda. I emailed you agenda beforehand. Here's what I thought we talked about. Is that right? And let's get into it. And it may very well be that you don't need to have any slides whatsoever, or you may want to have a slide or two that one has here's the workflow that you can talk to, or here's the problem statement. And it may be that those are things you have in your back pocket you can bounce to in the event that you need to have some sort of illustration to point to. If you've got a complex workflow that you want to talk about, it probably makes sense to have that slide in your pocket and then be able to put it up so that when you get to a certain point, the customer can kind of map you through how this workflow works and how you understand it and how they understand it and where there might be a disconnect.
I think, Brendan, you and I are both of the age that we were around before PowerPoint and before the internet. And I think PowerPoint and the internet have really given the customer a lot more access to information a lot sooner. And so if it's on your website, they've probably looked at it. If your competitors are talking about it, if they know how a process works, I don't think it's useful to have a PowerPoint slide that explains to people stuff that they already know. Like if you were giving me a presentation about Chick-fil-A franchise, you don't need to walk through the steps of how they do the drive-in. I know it all too well. And those are the types of slides I think that in this day and age, people get very frustrated with. Like, really? You're telling me what I already know. And in the old days, you were on the phone with them or you were in person with them. Now with Zoom, now with the internet, now with PowerPoint, with all these tools, it's not hard to vet a company well in advance. And so I think that means that really these presentations that we're doing are, like you said, really all about building rapport more than anything else. It's the know, like, and trust part.
Building rapport, but it's really about learning about from the customer's perspective. So, I mean, it's doing discovery. It's learning about what their issues are, what their challenges are. And if you have to have slides, the more detail you have on them, the more you're predefining the answer you might get back, or you're creating more potential objection. Oh, no, that's not how we do it. You clearly don't understand. But if there's no slide, then you can say, that's better. They can map it out and explain it, and you don't have a predefined, you haven't already set some level of expectation or put some sort of stake in the ground in terms of what your understanding is. This is where I think slides can do you a tremendous disservice in the sales process, because they predefine what the conversation might be. And I think that, this is for B2B sales where there's the possibility to kind of craft your solution to the customer need, or to focus on certain functionality or certain capabilities based on the customer need. You've got a consumer product that's locked down, and that may be a different thing.
Right.
Anyway,
if you're selling home repair, it's pretty straightforward, and the slides explain the process and what goes into it, and the warranty and all that.
Well, I guess, but it depends on what you're repairing. Yeah, it really depends on how flexible your solution is. If you're a general contractor that focuses on remodels or home repair, you may have the capability to do all sorts of repairing. And if you've got a slide that says plumbing and electrical and framing, and they say, we need a new bathroom, and it doesn't list bathrooms on there, then this is where slides come in.
That's a great example.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I see these slides. So I think using slides as a crutch, as a safety net, is something that as you get better at this, you get more expert in terms of how you talk to customers, you'll find that the less and less you need slides. And by the way, this is going to be really helpful when you're at a cocktail party, you're in an elevator, or you're in some other ad hoc situation where someone says, hey, what is it that you do? And you don't have the slides around.
Oh, I show them the slides on my phone then, Brendan. If you're in the elevator with me, I just pull out my phone, and I've got PowerPoint right on my phone.
Sure you do. Well, by the way, that's an indication that we beat the heck out of this topic. So,
there you go.
So let's wrap up, and maybe we do this again sometime. What do you think?
I think we should. I would enjoy that so much because, Brendan, I live for it. Let's chat sales.
That's right. All right. Very good, Bob. Talk soon, man. See you.
Okay, that was another episode of Let's Chat Sales, a quick one, of course, and I hope it was helpful. And if it was, please like and subscribe, and more importantly, share it with your friends. There should be something right here you could point to and click on and try that out. It should be good. It's probably good. Certainly short. It's probably helpful. And thanks for listening or watching.